the mission is to meet someone, you know, but and stick with someone.
Yeah.
But I can see that it becomes addictive to be like,
Just
date,
keep playing.
date, swipe.
I don't think I ever had Bumble, actually. I was on Tinder for a second, but it was honestly scary. It was like a cesspit of degenerate low lives. It was horrible.
It is the worst.
I built Tinder with them. If they can just delete me, it's like they've done nothing wrong.
You say anything, they can sue.
Do not take the bait. Fight for what you've built. My name's Whitney Wolfe, and I'm starting a revolution.
How much did you know about Whitney Wolfe's story and Bumble prior to being cast and joining the project as a producer?
I really didn't know about her story at all, which was one of the things that really drew me toward being a part of this. I think her story is such an inspiring one, and she achieved so much, both was sort of extraordinary in her professional career, but also the challenges she faced on like a human, level as a woman, and the way she overcame the sort of struggles in her life felt to me something that was a message I really felt very empowered by, and wanted to kind of, explore this story and bring it to screen.
Absolutely. And you've played real life characters. We've played characters inspired by real life people before. And I wondered, is there a different kind of responsibility that comes with playing these roles as opposed to fictional characters?
There is, I feel a huge sense of responsibility when you're playing someone real, because you really want to sort of honor or do justice to their story. And I just approach it in a way where I try and bring as much authenticity and integrity, and work really hard. But I feel a sort of pressure at whether I play a fictional or a real life person, to be honest, to want to just bring as much humanity as I can to what I'm doing.
Yeah, you absolutely did this with this role.
Thank
And
you.
Whitney also realises that by not challenging some of the misogyny at Tinder, she is in a way slightly complicit with the culture that's built there. What appealed to you about exploring the nuance of Whitney's situation as a woman who has a seat at the table but kind of no real power to make change?
You mean that Whitney didn't have any?
Yeah.
Well, I think what was interesting about her story was the journey she goes through from leaving college and entering into a very kind of notoriously male-dominated space, the tech space. I mean, even though we're in the tech world and in the dating app game, it's very sort of universal across all industry, really. But what happens as a woman if you're in that kind of a space, and the gender dynamics, and exploring gender equity, and kind of understanding what it might be like as a female entrepreneur in that space. And I guess the lesson she learned at Tinder through not feeling heard, or then ultimately the legal suit, she then went on to make sure that she did have all power and control of her, not only her company, but the mission and her purpose.
And completely disrupt the industry, which
Yeah,
is amazing.
exactly.
And there are some really big universal themes here of sexism, misogyny in the workplace that so many women will really sadly resonate with. And of course, Whitney is still under an NDA as well. Do you potentially hope that Whitney's inspiring story kind of gives voice to the women who have been silenced from telling their own?
Yeah, that was really, you just hit the nail on the head, to be honest. One of the things that really compelled me to want to be a part of this project and take on this role was this exploration of women being silenced, and how to take away someone's right to speak their truth or tell their story is a very vicious act. And I think it's a relevant and important conversation that we all need to be having. And I know that UK is looking into banning NDAs, and I think if this film can in any way, big or small, be a part or contribute to that topic, then I think everyone involved creatively would be really proud of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I read that you borrowed one of your friends' phones to play on their dating apps. What did you think of the gamification of dating? And has making a film like this made you reflect or change your opinion on dating and modern dating?
It's really interesting, because when you make a film, this film, of course, is about the women behind these dating apps and the ways in which she re-engineered dating apps to put women in the driver's seat and make women more safe and empowered. And that, to me, is just so pivotal and necessary and inspiring. But beyond that, I didn't really like see it as a dating app film. It's like really was about this woman's achievement as this sort of like visionary founder and a woman in business and an entrepreneur and in that space. So, but I guess it has changed my mind a bit about dating apps. I mean, I'd never really used them, so it was really interesting to sort of get my fix, and it is highly addictive. But I think that it depends which app you go on, right? Like they're all for different things, and I know for Bumble, the mission is to meet someone, you know, but and stick with someone. But I can see that it becomes addictive to be like,
just keep playing.
date, swipe.
Definitely. And like you say, Whitney was a visionary. And why is it so important that we see more women on screen in like STEM and tech and business roles?
Well, I think that cinema has the power to reach a lot of people, and if this can, you know, if there's younger girls, boys, anyone watching this and they're like, oh, I want to do that and I can do that and I see myself represented on screen and that makes me believe that I can too, then that's like, wow, that would be an amazing thing to be able to have encouraged and put out into the world.
I didn't know anything. It was really fun to learn about it.
Yeah, and had you ever used dating apps before, or like been aware of Bumble, or like?
I was totally aware of Bumble. I feel like everybody knew about Bumble because it was kind of revolutionary in the space, women swiping first. I was like on the apps for like a second. I don't think I ever had Bumble, actually. I was on Tinder for a second, but it was honestly scary. It was like a cesspit of degenerate low lives. It was horrible.
It is the worst. And your character is kind of an amalgamation of a lot of real life people, but I wondered if you drew inspiration from anyone in particular in real life or fiction to kind of build this character.
No, this was a totally fictional character from the brainchild of Rachel, and she was like, make her your own. So I didn't need to do any research exactly. I just imagined what I might be like if I were Whitney's friend in the story.
Yeah, and in that situation. And obviously your character is very conscious that Whitney is the only woman in the room, but she's not using her influence to bring other women into power. And I wondered if there was ever a time in your career where you felt like there was only room for one woman at the table, and you were perhaps either in that or on the outside of that, and whether you feel like we've made any progress since the 2010s when this all happened.
Well, totally. I feel like we've made an insane amount of progress. Like, I actually feel like Tisha saying that, like, you're the only woman in the room, you're not bringing us up, honestly feels very present day, because in the mid-2010s, I think we were just, like, scrounging for any amount of respect and recognition. I don't think it would have crossed their minds at the time, like, you're not bringing us up. I think it would have just been like, well, it's a woman in space, I feel like an incredible amount of progress has been made in the sense that we recognize intersectionality now. It's not just about gender equality, it's also equality for all races, genders, you know what I mean? We recognized able-bodiedness. I don't even think that was like a word in the mid-2010s. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it has been radicalized, like you say, because one woman's seat is not enough, and it
No,
never was.
not at all, yeah.
Yeah. And what do you hope the women especially take from the very inspiring journey that Tisha and Whitney and all of their female colleagues go on in this journey and kind of disrupt an industry and make lasting change?
Oh, I think this is inspiring. It has like a happy end, a hopeful end. So I hope that people feel inspired enough to like trust their own gut and to advocate for themselves and to like go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tisha might not be a co-founder, but she is an essential player in the founding of the app. Why is it so important to see more women in tech and STEM on screen?
Because they exist. I mean, that's just like, why is representation important? The power of film and TV and representation is that it tells people either on an explicit level or a subliminal level that like their stories matter, that they're important. And it might be a small thing, but it can affect some serious change in someone's self-confidence. That's like the power of what we do. We tell people like, hey, if you look like this and this is your story, like it's important enough to be on a screen, which is it can really affect someone's confidence.
Yeah, and exactly, and like at every single level as well. Like Tisha, even having the conversation with Whitney and kind of getting her to readdress her position is so important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Whitney isn't the only one dealing with the sexist and misogynistic workplace that they find themselves in. What advice would you give to any women who watch the film and they see themselves in Tisha's situation?
Well, if I were watching, when I read it, if I were watching it and when I read it, I was just like, oh, two things can be true at once. You can support your friend, you can have sympathy and empathy for what they're going through, and you can also say, like, hey, I respect that this is what you're going through, but you're also mistreating me. As someone who cares about you, you can care about me too. You know what I mean? I think that mutual respect and acknowledgement is important, especially among friends.
Yes.
And I think starting that dialogue is so important. Like, you don't have to just blindly support someone because they're going through a hard time if they're also being, if they're not recognizing the way their actions affect the people around them.
And that it also is a hard time for you as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're moving back from this high stakes tech world back into the world of finance for industry for the next season. Can you tease a little bit about what we can expect from that?
Of course not. No, I think you can expect from industry what you can always expect from industry. Drugs, sex, rock and roll. It's going to be great.
All the good stuff. Absolutely. And if you could explore another workplace sector in a film or series, which one would you choose next?
Oh, boy. Maybe like lawyer, maybe like a lawyer. I don't know.
Kind of like a Suits vibe?
More suits. I love a suit. In a suit is fine.
And after making this film, has it changed your perspective or your opinion of dating apps?
No, I'm locked in.
I was so interested that Whitney is still under the NDA, and I wonder what the research process was like for this film, considering that so much of her real life story is still kind of under wraps.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge responsibility to tell this story, and especially without speaking to her, it was super important to my writing partner and I and the whole team that we just did as much research as possible. There's a ton of stuff out there. There's interviews with everyone involved. There's tons of articles written. We poured over her court documents. The lawsuit is available online. I mean, we literally stalked everyone's old social media. We found like old vines that people had made to try to piece together like, oh, okay, so they were a couple here, trying to sort of piece together all those things and just make sure that we had of course there's some fictionalizing happening, of course there's some shaping happening, but making sure that was all on a bed of as much research, as deep of research as we could do.
Yeah, absolutely. And what interests you about telling Whitney's story in particular?
When I found out about Whitney's story, I thought it was both inspirational and cinematic, how she sort of took some of the most difficult things that ever happened in her life and then forged them into this great success. And additionally, just being a woman in a male-dominated field, like I was, reading interviews and articles with her and her talking about, both having some really hard times and then also her own complicity of feeling like initially there was only room for one woman at the table and sort of feeding into the boys club to get ahead. And so all those things, like I just related so hard to that and thought she found such a beautiful way to change her behavior and sort of and sort of move forward in a path forward that I was like, it just felt like a not only a film to me but also a film that I felt like I need to make this,
Yeah, because it's so true. And Whitney often says she feels like the only woman at the table. And I wondered if there was a time in your career where you felt like there was only space for one woman and you were maybe on the outside of that, wondering how to break in?
Yes, but I almost feel like the part that's more interesting to me and that I thought was interesting for Whitney was the moments that I was broken in and was like wanted to succeed and so didn't mind being the only woman at the table, and that's almost the more interesting and more sort of problematic part, is saying, okay, so it's a boys club and all the boys are broing out together, and like if I bro out too, then look, then people like me and then I have success and then I get to get on the next job, and like that problematic structure and like me being part of that problematic structure and then sort of stepping back as I got older and being like, what was I doing and how do we make this better? That was what, really spoke to me.
Yeah, because there is such nuance in that, in the fact that she is kind of, because she doesn't challenge the norm, she feels slightly complicit with it. What advice would you give to people who watch the film and kind of see themselves in the character of Whitney and her other female colleagues who don't challenge the kind of toxic workplace environment they're in, but want to change it?
I mean, I think it's kind of an impossible situation to be in. Like, it's easy for me to say now, oh, you gotta speak up. You gotta get out there and tell your boss to, like, back off and, whatever. But I really feel for people who it's really hard to speak up. And so I think it's one of those things where if you feel comfortable, if you feel able to push back or find a path that you feel better about, then you should. And if not, then I just hope that you have, like, a good support system and can, like, hang in there, because it's, it can be tough. It can be really tough.
Absolutely. And I thought one of the most impactful scenes is when Whitney is obsessively reading the comments on social media, and it's just fueling her panic and anxiety. Could you break down a bit about how you went about composing that scene and externalizing that rising panic that I feel like so many of us relate to as well when it comes to social media?
Thank you for saying that. You're spot on that I was just trying to make that feel as visceral as possible. And so, it started with sort of tonally, it was in the script that way of like, we called it the spiral. It's like we're gonna try to create this spiral of like day to night to drinking to text messages to panicking to reading to all that stuff. And so it of course all starts with Lily's performance. Even though we're doing these little quick pieces, she's giving a full deep breakdown moment in each one of those, which is a massive lift for her to do, because it wasn't just we're doing the one breakdown scene. It was like we're just spending 2 days going a million different locations and doing these pieces, and so she really, she really committed, and I'm so grateful for that. And then stylistically, it was like a sort of a project with my cinematographer Doug Emmett to figure out what are the most dynamic ways we can shoot this that sort of create that off-kilter feel. We ended up like putting things in front of the lens and doing little light tricks and things just to make it feel as disconcerting as the character's experience was. And then with score and editing, just how intense can we make this feel so that it's not just, oh, it seems like she had a hard time, but like the audience ideally is like kind of having their own hard time.